Good morning, guys. I hope that you're doing fine, or good afternoon, or good night, depending the time that you watch this video. So today, we're going to start with the next topic of the book that is from Unit 31, sorry, that is object relative pronouns. So as you see right now, we are just about to finish the book and finish the level as well. We are just missing this topic and the next one, and we are done. Done with the level, done with level 23, and as well done with the English course of Insight. But let's not talk about sad things and let's start with the topic per se, that is object relative pronouns. So you may notice that it's really similar to the topic of the last time, that it was subject relative pronouns or subject relative clauses in this case. Why? Because there are many types of clauses. And if you remember in the last class, we discussed that a clause is almost the same as a sentence. Why almost? Why? Because they have subjects, they have verbs, but the difference is that a clause needs to be attached to something else to make sense. That means that they don't have a complete meaning on their own, and object relative clauses are not the exception. But how they are different? What is the difference between the object relative clauses and the subject relative clauses? Well, the name is telling you already the difference, that is an object. That means that one can be used as a subject and the other one can be used in the position of an object. You remember object pronouns and transitive verbs, it's going to be easy to understand. But without further ado, let's see what this topic is all about. First, we're going to start about object relative clauses and what they are. And we have that they describe, identify, and give more information about a noun, okay? In an object relative clause, the relative pronoun is the object. So that means that here we're talking about the object of the sentence and not the subject, like in the previous clauses that we saw. So we're going to see some examples for you to understand better what am I trying to explain to you over here. So the first thing that we notice is this example. There are many diseases that viruses cause. There are many diseases that viruses cause. What are you describing over here? Basically, you are describing the diseases. You are giving a characteristic about them. And in this case, we're talking about one in specific. There are many diseases out there, but we're talking about one in specific, that is the one that is caused by viruses. So over here that you see that you have the word that is going to be or relative pronoun for these kinds of clauses is the object. Then we have the verb as well. Sorry, we have the subject and then we have the verb. So what's the difference? Here you have the relative pronoun not as the subject of the clause, but as the object, okay? As the object. Why the object? There are many diseases. Diseases that what? Okay, that what? Here we're going to answer the question what or who as well, as we did when we were talking about transitive verbs. So diseases that what? That virus causes, or that viruses cause. That means that in this case, we're giving a characteristic, but at the same time, we are introducing the clause with a subject relative pronoun. Over here, as you see, we have the subject that is viruses, and we have the verb that is cause. That means that in this regard, we can have a subject, and we are going to have as well another pronoun introducing the clause. So for example, we have these examples over here that are going to help you to understand better. And first we have, you can infect people. This is your regular sentence that it has complete meaning on its own and doesn't need anything else. But then notice the following, that it says object relative pronoun. So that means that for introducing the following clause, that is an object relative clause, you need a pronoun. And what kind of pronoun are you going to use? You can use, for example, that. That, as if you remember in the last class, we discussed that that can be anything, a subject, an object, can be whatever. Over here is introducing another clause to us. And what is going to be the clause? Well, it's going to have a subject, a verb, but it's not going to have a complete meaning on its own. So basically, think of object relative pronouns as the glue that is joining the two ideas together. For example, you can infect people that you may, I don't know, I didn't make these examples, but this is really fitting for the situation that we are living right now. Maybe it's a coincidence, I don't know. But what you see over here is that you can infect people that you meet, Something that is really interesting over here is that I want to exemplify in the following to you. We're going to make this black so we make it kind of disappear. And if I erase this, I erase the that. You can say, you can infect people you meet. In that regard, you still have an object relative clause. What's the difference? That you erase the object relative pronoun. There are some cases in which the object relative pronoun in an object relative clause can be omitted, and it doesn't matter because the meaning is conveyed. You don't need it in order to have meaning in a sentence, okay? It is something extra to be more specific, but in some cases, we normally don't use it. However, it is important to know that there are some, and in some situations that you need to add them to make sense of the sentence. And there are some others that cannot be omitted at all. We're going to see that just in a second. So then we have others that are who and whom. And we have the virus that the scientist studied. That the scientist studied. Over here as well, you can erase this, that, and you can have the viruses the scientist studied, and it's going to be completely the same sentences with no changes. What's happening over here? They can be omitted. But we're going to see examples of which cannot be omitted at all in a sentence. What's a type of flu? Which as well we have it as an object relative pronoun. In an object relative clause, the relative pronoun is the object of the clause. As you see over here, if you remember when we were studying subject relative pronouns or subject relative clauses, they were not the object, but the subject of something. Over here, they are not the subject, but they are the object. Remember, transitive verbs, you can ask them the questions what or who. For example, I can give you an example right now on top of my mind, and I can say, I told him that he needed to come. I told him that he needed to come. What did I tell? Or what did I tell? That he needed to come. You see, that he needed to come. All of that is my direct object from my verb. That means that that is the object that I'm talking about in my sentence. Therefore, that is the position that they have. Let's take a look at some examples over here on the screen. So we're going to see this one that it says, cold and flu are illnesses that viruses cause. Are illnesses, are what? Illnesses caused by what? By viruses. So you see over here, they are the object, they are describing the illness, they are giving us more characteristics about that, but they are an object. They are not a subject per se. Because in this case, how do you know that they are not a subject itself? Because you can have over here that is acting as an object, and over here you will have another subject and another verb in the form of viruses and cause. The object relative pronouns are the following. We have who, whom, which, and that. You use that, who, and whom for people, okay? In the other case, when we were talking about subject relative clauses, we had that who and that were the only ones used for people. Here you can use that, who, and a new one that is whom. So for example, the professor that I met yesterday has the flu. Over here, as you see, we're giving an extra characteristic about the professor, but it's not relevant at all. You can say the professor has the flu, okay? And it's going to have sense no matter what, but over here, we are describing something, okay? We're describing the professor, what kind of professor I'm talking about. Is a math professor, is the English professor? No, the professor that I met yesterday. It's another type of person. I'm trying to identify it and to recognize it through more information. So use that or which for things. As in the subject relative clauses, you're going to use these two pronouns for exactly the same thing. For example, we have, she has a virus that younger people often get. Okay? She has a virus that young people often get. You see over here, a virus. We're describing that virus. And over here, you see that you have the object relative pronoun introducing the clause. You will have the subject that is young people and get that is the verb. Object relative clauses can combine two ideas as subject relative clauses do as well. So they both work as the glue of two ideas that mix them together and make them a complete sentence. For example, the virus, that is the virus. That is the virus. Nothing else. That is a sentence. Rob gave me the virus. Okay? So if I want to join these two ideas, first I'm going to eliminate the word virus because it's going to be redundant to have virus twice in a sentence. And then I'm going to join the two ideas by saying that is the virus that Rob gave me. I'm giving a characteristic to the virus to make sure that you understand that I'm talking about the same thing. You can omit the relative pronoun in an object relative clause, as I was mentioning before. For example, you can have the doctor who spoke with, she spoke with, had the cold himself. Who she spoke with. I can eliminate the who, and it will make complete sense as saying the doctor she spoke with had a cold himself. No problem whatsoever in using it in that regard. Watch the things that you touch if you are infected, okay? Watch the things that you touch if you are infected. Over here, we can eliminate that and it's going to make the same sense. So the relative pronoun is followed by a subject and a verb. Something that is going to help you to identify if it is an object relative clause or a subject relative clause is that in a subject relative clause, the relative pronoun normally works as a subject. So that means that after the pronoun, you will have a verb. In this case, no, you will have first the pronoun, then the subject, and after that the verb. That is an easy way to identify if you're talking about an object relative clause or a subject relative clause. I wash the towels that she uses. You see, I wash the towels. What kind of towels? The ones that she uses. But over here, you have the pronoun that is introducing the subject and the verb. And then you have the subject itself, that is she. And then you have the verb that is used. So in that case, you see, that is not acting as a subject. Really important information for you to remember. The flu vaccine that they used didn't work. That they use as well. We see that introducing us the clause, and then you have the subject and the verb. An adjective relative clause usually comes right after the word it modifies. You can modify any noun or pronoun in a sentence. That is another difference, that in this case, these kind of clauses, they will come after the thing that we're modifying. In the case of subject relative pronouns or subject relative clauses, they can come at the beginning of a sentence. So that is something interesting and something that is going to help you to differentiate both type of clauses as well. For example, the virus that she studied was the type of flu. You see that we have the subject that is the virus, and right after the subject, we have the object relative clause. Why? Because even though they are objects, they don't need to be after a certain verb. They need to be after the subject or the noun that they are modifying. She washed the towels that she used. Same examples. You have towels, that in this case is the object that we're talking about. And then you have the characteristics describing it, that is the object relative clause. He's the one who I contacted on the phone. He's the one person. You see, you have over here, you have a subject, here you have an object, and you have a pronoun. So they can also be after as well, after an object, okay? An object, I'm talking about a direct object in the sentence, like I wash what? The towels. What kind of towels? That she used, the ones that she used. Then we have the pronoun. She's the one what? Who I contacted on the phone. Okay, you see, a pronoun. And what's a pronoun? It's another subject, just taking the place of another word that you know. So you see, we are going to see the difference between the subject relative clauses and the object relative clauses. Through this difference, we're going to make it a little bit more colorful so we can know of which are we talking about. In yellow, we're going to have over here subject relative clauses that we're going to see the difference. We're going to mark object relative clauses with another color, maybe blue. So we already know what are we talking about on this chart, and we see the difference. There is one in which they both share the same characteristic, but we're going to leave it like that. In the relative clause, the relative pronoun is, in the subject relative clauses, is the subject, as I was mentioning. It's the subject of the sentence, or in this case, it's the subject of the clause. That means that it's nothing else next to it. It's not another pronoun that is introducing it itself. It's the pronoun and the subject. But in the case of object relative pronouns, they are the object, okay? The object that you're talking about. In a sentence, the relative pronoun modifies any noun or pronoun. This happens in both, okay? In both, in subject relative clauses or in object relative clauses, the relative pronoun modifies any noun or pronoun that you have in the sentence. If you're talking about a bottle, if you're talking about a cell phone, if you're talking about a pencil case, if you're talking about anything that you can imagine, that can be modified by either a subject relative clause or an object relative clause. In a sentence, the relative pronoun usually comes right after the word it modifies, okay? In both cases, right after the word it modifies, with the difference that in subject relative clauses, it can go a little bit at the beginning sometimes, depending on the kind of sentence that you have. In a sentence, the relative clause has a new verb, okay? A new verb. The relative clause has a new verb. So in this case, we're talking about a new verb, like for example, I can tell you that is the person who came to the class. Who came to the class? Who came? So that is the person. You have another verb, who came. While in the case of your relative pronouns, a new subject and a verb. So in this case, when you introduce the clause, what's the only thing new that you have is the verb. Who came to the class? Who? What do you have after this who? That is the subject, you have a verb. But if I say that, okay, he's the person, or we can say, for example, she's the person that she consults for these kinds of problems. Okay, she's the person that she consults for these kinds of problems. That she consults. You see that after the pronoun that is introduced in the clause, you will have a subject and a verb. Then you have that the relative pronoun can be omitted. No, in the subject-relative clause, it cannot be omitted because it is the subject of the clause. Therefore, it needs to appear because you need to have both elements visible that are subject and verbs. In the case of other relative clauses, yes. Just in the case of whose, it cannot be omitted. You will see why in a minute. But in this case, all of them, who, whom, which, that, can be omitted and the meaning will be conveyed. In the other case, no, because you will be eliminating the subject. Okay. For example, I cannot say, that is the doctor came yesterday. That is the doctor came yesterday. What am I doing over there is I'm using a subject relative clause and I'm eliminating the subject, okay? Or the relative pronoun. And doesn't make any sense. Okay, that is the doctor came yesterday. It sounds like I'm talking like without knowing how to use grammar, but what happens over here is that I'm omitting a really, really important piece of information, that is who, okay? But in the other case, I can say that is the doctor that he went to see. That he went to see. He eliminated that, and that is the doctor he went to see. No problem. It has a complete meaning. The relative pronouns include, in the case of subject relative clauses, we have who, which, that, and whose. And in the other case, we have who, whom, which, that, and whose. We have an extra that is whom. So in this case, using subject and object relative clauses, subject relative clauses, the doctor who treated her had a cold. You see, the doctor, we're talking about a doctor over here. And here, as you see, we have the subject relative clause that is introducing some characteristic about the doctor. You have the subject and the verb. You have the doctor had a cold, the doctor treated her. That is the combination of the two ideas will give us the result of the sentence that is marked in blue right now. So in the other case, we're going to talk about object relative clauses. Then we have the doctor who she visited had a cold. The doctor had a cold, she visited the doctor. Who she visited. Notice over here, who she visited, you have an object relative clause introduced by who, and after that you have its own subject and verb. And in the other case, we have the subject and the verb. We don't have anything else introduced in the clause. Object relative clauses can use a variety of verb forms and they can also show possession. For example, he doesn't touch surfaces that the patient touches. That the patient touches, okay? Doesn't touch. He didn't touch the surfaces. We are using the same sentence, but now in the past. He hasn't touched the surface that the patient has touched. Over here, we're using present perfect. The student whose towel she used had the flu. Whose towel? Whose towel? Over here, why is so important the pronoun whose, and why can I omit it? The reason why is because whose normally is used to show possession. So that means that something belongs to someone or someone belongs to something. Like for example, you belong to a certain organization, a certain object belongs to you, and therefore you use whose to show that possession. The student whose towels she used has the flu. It was the student's towel. Okay, the student whose towel she used. Over here, we're talking about that this towel belongs to this student, the student that we are talking at the beginning of the sentence. Therefore, we cannot omit this information because it is important. Imagine if I say the sentence, the student towel she used had the flu. The student towel she used had the flu. The student towel. So that means that you're talking about a towel for students? No, right? We're talking about a towel that belongs to a certain student. Therefore, we need whose, because if not, it doesn't make any sense. So we have whose plus a noun shows possession in an object relative clause. We have the woman whose husband the doctor saw also needs an appointment. So the woman whose husband the doctor saw. If I say the woman the doctor saw, okay? The woman the doctor saw was also needs of an appointment. It doesn't make any sense. We have also a noun always follows whose, and we have the scientist whose article we read is giving a lecture at school. You see over here that we have a noun, okay? Always after whose, we're going to have a noun. A noun, and even though after that you can continue the sentence. Do not omit whose. The scientist article we read is giving us a lecture at school. You see that in this case, it's not going to work. Whose can combine two sentences as well as any other object relative pronoun. And we have like the woman is sick, the doctor saw her children. And the woman whose children the doctor saw is sick. Over here, we're combining the two ideas. Whose replaces the possessive form in the second sentence, and that is a scientist, we read his article. That is the scientist whose article we read. You combine the two ideas, in this case, you're showing the possession of something. And with that, we're going to end the explanation of object-related clauses. So as a way of summary, remember that we have the following pronouns that we can use in object-related clauses that are who, whom, which, that, and whose. Remember that they can go normally after the pronoun or object or subject that you are modifying. As well, remember that they have a pronoun that introduces the clause, and after this pronoun, you have a subject and a verb, as opposite as the subject-related clauses that they have the subject and then just have the verb. Remember that we normally use them to describe something or someone and give more extra information about this person or object that we are talking about. And basically, that is the difference between object-related clauses and subject-related clauses. I hope that this video is helpful. I hope that you have understood everything completely. And if you have any question, let me know in the Google Classroom platform. I will gladly answer them and help you out to understand this topic. So remember, keep on studying, keep on watching the videos, and I will see you until the next video. So take care.